Well, good evening and welcome to Queer News Tonight. This is the world's first and only LGBTQ plus daily evening television news. We're broadcasting live and then we're available on demand. And we're available on all smart televisions, including Roku, Apple TV, Android TV, Amazon Fire TV, YouTube, and Facebook. It's time to queer up the news. It's Wednesday, August 23rd, 2023. We are live and literally out of the closet and into the headlines. So many of your important stories we're going to tell this evening on Queer News Tonight.
This is the world's first live daily LGBTQ evening news show, literally out of the closet and into the headlines on Queer News Tonight with Al Ferguson.
I'm your anchor at Queer News Tonight, Al Ferguson, and this evening we bring you the news of and a perspective representing the LGBTQ plus community from South Florida, America, and across our planet.
This is the world's first and only unedited live LGBTQ plus evening news show. Whatever happens, unique in LGBTQ plus news, you will see it and hear it.
Hotspots Magazine, Happening Out Television Network, is a nonprofit 501c3 media company in the same models of PBS and NPR, but designed for the LGBTQ plus community. Our mission is to support the 10 pillars of our LGBTQ plus community. We want to inform and educate the key issues of our Black community, Latino, lesbians and queer women, trans, student youth, seniors, HIV/AIDS, healthcare, business, social justice, and of course faith. Help us support our community.
We are part of the largest LGBTQ plus media companies in America, Hotspots Magazine and Happening Out Television Network.
Our magazine is celebrating 38 years of the LGBTQ plus experience, and our television news, talk, and entertainment shows support our mission to educate the LGBTQ plus and broader community.
Well, let's welcome anchor Lexi Goza. She is the chair of the Greater Miami LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce's Women's Empowerment Council, the secretary of the LGBTQIA Advisory Board for the City of Miami Beach, and founder of PFLAG Melbourne, and owns a State Farm insurance agency in Miami. Good evening, Lexi.
Thanks. Happy to be here, Al.
All right, next, let's welcome John Hayden, a journalist for 28 years. He now works with several outlets, including Out South Florida, as senior reporter and community editor. Welcome, John.
Thank you very much, Al. It's great to be here with a panel of wonderful representatives of the LGBTQ plus community.
Absolutely. Let's welcome TriniDaddy. He currently is a violinist and pianist with the Miami City Ballet and is the program director for the Seminole Theater Players in Homestead. Welcome, TriniDaddy.
Hi, thank you for having your favorite happy brown anchor on Queer News Tonight.
Brown anchor. All right. Let's welcome Mark Pettitt. Mark is a pioneering traveler and coordinated the very first gay pride parade ever on the continent of Antarctica. He's also a former Mr. Sawmill Leather Sir, and he and his husband Luke run linksbyluke.com. It's a chainmail, harness, and pride accessory shop. And by day, he's a leadership coach and trainer with the largest leadership development company in the world. Welcome, Mark.
Hello, gay people. Thank you, Al.
LGBTQ plus.
Correct.
All right. We are the reporters for Queer News Tonight. And this evening, we begin with the queer headlines. The LGBTQ community in South Florida and across America is diverse. Our community across the world is vast. And here are the bullet points of the queer news for today, Wednesday, August 23rd. Well, let's queer up courts. Court finds Maryland parents can't challenge the rule that stops schools from outing LGBTQ plus students. A federal appeals court has ruled that a group of parents cannot challenge a Montgomery County Public Schools policy advising teachers and staff not to out trans-identifying or gender non-conforming children to their parents. The Fourth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled 2-1 that 3 parents in Montgomery County, Maryland, lacked standing to challenge the policy because they had not alleged their children were transgender in the first place. The policy in question, which the Montgomery County Board of Education adopted for the 2020-2021 school year, permitted schools to develop so-called gender support plans for trans identifying or questioning students to ensure that they feel comfortable expressing their gender identity. Under the policy, school staff is expected to create a plan governing a student's preferred names, pronouns, participation in athletics or school extracurricular activities, and the restroom and locker room facilities that they are allowed to access. The policy also requires teachers and counselors to gauge the level of support a student receives or anticipates receiving from their parents if such information is disclosed. While ideally, the gender support plans work toward the inclusion of the family, school staff may choose to withhold information about the plans if a student's family would not support their coming out or socially transitioning. Well, is all of that clear as mud? Because it's clear as mud.
Yeah.
First, I would suggest that even in its bit of ambiguity of the ruling, it's certainly in Montgomery County and in Maryland way better off than where we are here in Florida. So we could pay attention to what is going on in Maryland. Their intent is to provide some level of protection for trans and non-conforming gender identification in Maryland. And the court is saying that those that are trying to stop that interpretation don't have legal standing to challenge the law. That's really what this decision 2-1 by the federal court is saying.
I actually disagree with the opinion. I read the dissenting opinion. It was 2-1, the one, which is saying that they do have standing as parents because the rule is blanketed to all students. So you don't need to know if somebody is transgendered or not. The rule, I wouldn't say law, the rule is applied to everybody. So I do think that they have legal standing, and the courts decided to punt and just say, we're not going to rule on this. And I think they should have taken the case and ruled on it. And the ruling should be that basically in any kind of social work, when you have a school counselor and they suspect that there could be potential abuse going on in the home, they don't have to report immediately to a parent to say, oh, your kid says that you smacked them, in the face, or, they investigate first. And this rule does not say that they're excluding the parents from it. They just say that we may take a little bit of time. It may take a day or two to understand what is going on, just like any social worker would do. So I think they should have taken the case. I do think that they have standing, and I think they should have lost.
And I'm curious, in terms of the minority opinion that you're reading, the one of the 2-1 of the decision, why is that judge suggesting that they're just basically punting, that the majority decision doesn't want to deal with the issue? Did they suggest why the judges are? I think I read an abridged version of it, so he may have said something more about it, but from what I read, the excerpts of it, the basic idea was that of course it applies to all students, regardless of whether if they're transgendered or not.
Yeah, to a certain extent, I agree with Trini. I think the court really should have picked this up, and so that we could get an affirmation, not just kicking the can down the road. Because I'll tell you the kids that I really feel scared for, and that's the ones whose parents are going to have standing. The ones who are going to be able to say, my child was gay, or my child was queer, or my child was trans, and you didn't tell me about it. Those are the kids that are going to be in a world of trouble because they are not going to have a support system. The case that a court, either in Maryland or somewhere else with a safe law, they're the ones that are going to bear the brunt. And my God, I feel so bad for them.
Yeah, the effect of this decision, I think, overall, is really just pushing gay and trans kids further in the closet. And we have research going back to the 80s moving forward. My master's research was in suicide rates for gay and trans for the period of about the 90s or so. And how closeted a population has to be is in direct proportion to the number of people in that community that end up taking very drastic measures to escape, including suicide. At one point, those rates were 50 times what they were for a binary straight person, we got to about as good as 4 to 5 times, which is still horrible.
Yeah.
This pushes us back towards that 50 number.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Being a parent of 2 children and having gone through navigating schools and safety, my older son was bullied constantly, and it was always a struggle dealing with the administration. And we also rallied and got the school board to add sexual orientation and gender identity to their non-discrimination policies, not only for students, but also employees, because my wife at the time worked for the school board. So that was a huge win for us then. Obviously, it doesn't mean that much today. Hopefully it will in a little while again, but I can really relate to navigating that as a parent is difficult. And so I understand why a parent might step up and say, wait a minute, if something's happening with my kid, I want to know about it. But to your point, right, like it's very similar to a situation where there's an allegation of abuse and they have time to investigate and figure out, is this going to put the child at further risk or not? So I think it's good that it stands, but we should have gotten affirmation. I agree.
All right, now let's queer up out South Florida. Drag enemy DeSantis dragged during first GOP debate. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis tried to silence drag queens. Tonight, they were loud, proud, and very opinionated. Hamburger Mary's in Wilton and Orlando held viewing parties for the first Republican primary debate. Hosted by drag queens, they debated which Republican fascist is the most ridiculous and dangerous. They may have been a bit biased. As the culture warrior and basic bigot that he is, DeSantis is LGBTQ plus enemy number 1. He and his enablers in Tallahassee have passed a huge gay-bashing agenda that includes Don't Say Gay, blocking trans health care, book bans, and a bag on drag entertainment. That last law has been blocked by a judge, and now drag queens are going public with their opinions on the biggest night of DeSantis' flailing presidential campaign. President Biden predicted the 8 candidates on stage would try to out-MAGA each other. The queens called them out at every step. Donald Trump, the twice-impeached ex-president who currently faces 91 felony charges in 4 different jurisdictions, wasn't there. But the mini-Trump acolytes did their best to win over the cold hearts and empty minds of the red hats. This is a crucial time for the LGBTQ plus community. And like at other critical moments, drag queens are leading the way. I'm about to submit my story, and it will be published soon online at outsfl.com. And, I think it's really important. I think it's very appropriate that Hamburger Mary's is hosting this tonight because they're the business, the one in Orlando specifically, that challenged the law in Florida that got the stay. So that's why drag queens can now be public. I've done a story about how Hamburger Mary's here in Wilton has these doors that just open so you can see into the restaurant, and they're going to be open tonight. And the drag queens are going to be visible from the street, which is everything DeSantis doesn't want. And they're going to be saying and amplifying the LGBTQ plus opinion. And that's really something that Governor DeSantis doesn't want.
Agreed.
Is basic bigot already copywritten, or can we possibly use that in our LGBTQ plus marketing?
You know what?
That phrase is priceless, John.
Yeah, we need an Instagram account with that, I think.
Basic
right?
bigot, yeah.
No basic bigot.
Yes. Yeah.
Basic bigot.
I will tell you that I struggle with this so much when I'm traveling. So in the past 30 days, I've been to Munich, Montana, and Canada. And every time that I say, people ask, where are you from? Where are you visiting from? And every time I say Florida, they all go, oh. Like, oh, really, really. I got into a 30-minute conversation with a guy in a gift shop, a souvenir shop. And 99.9% of the time, they're in support of us out in the rest of the country and the world. And they're just like, what is going on? He's crazy. What is going on? And also, are we living in like some bizarro world? How is it possible that a presidential candidate has how many
91 felony charges.
91 charges? Like, what world are we living in? I can't wrap my mind around.
World.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they have so much to choose from. I think they're going through the different candidates to see which one is worse than the other one.
Yeah.
And I can't tell myself. I was just watching an interview with Vivek Ramaswamy, who is this brown trash. Oh, I can't stand him. That how he's representing us brown folks in America, which is completely the opposite of the rational, like scientists, Matt, this guy is like this kind of bro. Yeah. And what I was really upset about was Bill Maher, who I really like, has turned into some person I don't recognize and was just kissing his ass the whole time, telling him how beautiful he is and how young he is and how everybody's going to flock to him when and Vivek was saying, I want to basically try to take away the voting rights of anybody from 18 to 25 is what his next campaign promise is going to be unless they pass a civics test. And I'm like, were you not here for civil rights when we tried that in the 60s? Like, right? It's ridiculous. And then saying we want young people to come out and vote. I mean, just every one of them comes out and says something worse the next day. So,
well, he specifically is in a situation we're going to see unveil in the next number of days. He basically rejected conspiracy theories and what you would see in the internet and Newsmax, etc., but now has come out with a conspiracy theory of 9/11 and has reignited, and they're backtracking of saying no, he didn't say it, and you've taken it out of context, and they've played the tape of him saying word for word exactly what he said. All 8 of these candidates have difficulty, and then there was 9. All 9 of these candidates have great difficulty. One of the things that I think is super interesting to your point about traveling, I just recently had a conversation in one of the big drag Reddit pages, and there's like 150,000 subscribers in this Reddit talking about drag, and I posted something about Florida, and it was like a tidal wave against Florida, and they don't mean to attack me, and they're not really attacking me, but they attacked me. Yeah. And basically I was schooled completely that why are you there, and get up and leave Florida. And I said, there's an estimated 1.5 million LGBT in this state. Where do you expect them to go? Yeah. And pick up their homes and their lives and their
businesses
jobs and their businesses. Lexi owns a State Farm in Miami. Where is LGBTQ plus Lexi going to be going? And it's an unrealistic standard. Sure. So for those around the country and around the world that are critical in Florida, we understand we're critical of Florida. But the answer is not for queer Floridians to leave the state of Florida. And the answer is not for America and queer America to not come to the state of Florida. Right. Mm-hmm. Those are superficial non-answers.
That's right.
And that's what is happening tonight. And we applaud Hamburger Mary's for standing up for our community.
Absolutely.
Fight is the answer.
Yes.
Capitulation is not.
Agreed. Next, let's queer up sports. LA Rams Jose Capetillo and Brendan Ryan become the first gay cheerleading coaches in the NFL. Things are changing for the better in the NFL. Carl Nassib made headlines in 2021 by becoming the only active player to ever come out in the NFL. Last month, Jaguars coach Kevin Maxson became the first male coach to publicly come out, and now we find out there are out gay NFL cheerleaders too. After 3 seasons on the Los Angeles Rams cheerleading team, Jose Capetillo and Brendan Ryan are now cheer captains, making them the first out gay men to ever lead an NFL cheerleading team. In an interview, Ryan told Queerty that becoming the first out gay captain felt surreal. Capetillo said, quote, "Knowing that our teammates voted for us to be in this position is a really special feeling. It makes us feel super supported," end quote. This is quite an accomplishment, but these two are used to breaking down barriers. During their rookie season, the Rams made it all the way to Super Bowl 53, and Capetillo and Ryan were there to cheer them on alongside 3 other out gay cheerleaders. This marked the first time an NFL team had 5 out gay cheerleaders performing at a Super Bowl. Prior to joining the Rams, Ryan had never been to a Pride, but this year the cheerleading team got the opportunity to perform in West Hollywood Pride. Wow, So when I first read the headline, I was like, oh, there are gay lesbian cheerleaders? What? I was like, oh, man.
Where did that Google search take you?
I hadn't thought about that angle. Okay.
I was a cheerleader in college.
What? Of course you were.
Yes, I know. Kind of predictable for the USF Bulls for their basketball team.
Wow.
And people are always surprised to hear that being gay in cheerleading is one of the most difficult sports to be gay in. It is the most closeted. It can be one of the most homophobic spaces that there are in sports. My roommate and I, both out gay men, joined the team. And I'd say probably within 6 months, just a lot of social maneuvering pushed us out of it.
Oh,
this is a
no.
big deal and makes my heart so happy
Aw.
to see.
I love that.
Well, first off, gay male cheerleaders. Who would have thunk?
I've thunk it many times.
Yes. I'm getting ready to
Different
make that
show.
joke, by the way.
Sorry.
And it's an issue that we're probably going to learn soon, that if they can be successful in cheerleading as gay, they might even be good on Broadway or at RuPaul's Drag Race. I mean, come on now. And I love the story because at the end of the day, when I was in high school, this would be impossible. It would be impossible, like what you said at the University of South Florida.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a real college, so it doesn't really count.
How dare
I
you?
went to UCF, which was the real school. And my best Trixie was a cheerleader at UCF. And somebody that I happen to know very intimately today was a cheerleader in high school. So I seem to have a penchant for that.
Yeah.
But at once upon a time, all jokes aside, this is really a wonderful story because to be a cheerleader was once upon a time, and maybe still, something that would create a lot of joke and a lot of recrimination. It's typical gay male, which is why I didn't think about the lesbian aspect of the story. So it's really, I think, a great story.
Well, I love Bring It On. So I think that this should be part of the next Super Bowl. I think we should lean into it and have like a little twerk section of it and just like, make it this crazy headline the next day with like all the drunk bros. Or like, but I bet you some of them kind of like it.
Yeah.
And recently I have met some of them that were like, pretty anti-LGBT. And then I'm like, wait a second, I can pick up something. I'm picking up your scent. And then I'm like, I got some confirmation. So next, let's queer up trans rights. New survey shows transgender people are trying to escape Florida. New data released by the Human Rights Campaign reveals the virtually universal negative impact discriminatory legislation is having on LGBTQ+ adults. Don't say gay laws, bathroom bills, and gender-affirming care restrictions for both minors and adults are negatively affecting a large majority of LGBTQ+ Americans. For trans people in states like Florida, the laws are an existential threat driving them to leave their homes. 8 in 10 transgender and non-binary adults in Florida want to move or already have taken steps to move as a result of gender-affirming care bans. The same number would consider leaving the country altogether. More than half of trans people and 28% of other LGBTQ+ adults want to find work in a different state due to gender-affirming care bans. More than 36% of other LGBTQ+ adults say they want to or plan to move out of Florida because of gender-affirming care bans. And almost 80% of other LGBTQ+ adults report that bans on gender-affirming care make them feel less safe as a member of the community. For transgender and non-binary adults, that number rises to more than 9 out of 10 people. According to the HRC, there are currently 21 states across the U.S. that have enacted laws banning gender-affirming care. Collectively, they're home to nearly 97,000 transgender youth aged 13 to 17. I'm going to kind of piggyback on what Lexi was talking about, going into other states and having them kind of feel sorry for us. And also what you're saying is that why don't you just leave? This is my state. You get out.
Yeah.
And I feel for the past few years after gay marriage was passed, I feel like there was a little bit of a golden period where we all had such a hopeful outlook on what our country was going towards. And then this has just come, slapped us in the face. But I really feel like we are moving the pendulum, swinging it back in the other direction. And now that some of these...
You're hopeful of that.
I am very hopeful. I actually think that it's starting right now. I think that with all of this politics and all the MAGA world, I think they're starting to show their true self. I think with the abortion, the overturning of Roe v. Wade, there is a huge backlash that has just started now. I do think that the worst has kind of, hopefully, has come to pass. And now I think it's retribution time. And I think we're starting right now, and I can't wait.
That's interesting.
There's a new study that was released this week that gender-affirming surgeries tripled over a 3-year period. From I think it was 16 to 19 or 17 to 20. So clearly there is a need. And this was before everybody started getting riled up. So people were starting to come out and feel better about getting their surgeries. It was available to them. My question is, to what end? What is the purpose of banning these laws? And putting aside insurance issues, and yes, it should be covered medical care, but just putting that aside, what other elective surgeries are being banned specifically state by state? Are they going to come in and say, no, you can't get a nose job, and no, you can't get something repaired on you that needs cosmetically to look better? We're not banning any of those. We're not banning, I was going to say vasectomies, but I don't want to give them any ideas on, because they're so pro-reproduction. But there is just no point to this except to gain votes and step on people.
And, I think it's very important to add a little clarification to your observation, because first, the increase that took place over those 3 years that you're talking about were not minors. Those are adults making decisions of their own medical care. And whose right is it to decide that surgical affirming care is not a decision that an adult can make first? They blur the line to say, well, see, we're seeing surgeries increase, and then they try to extrapolate it to minors. That is not happening. Minor surgical involvement for the trans community is virtually non-existent. Hormone therapy is a different issue. And as it relates to hormone therapy, whose right is it if we're going to talk about parental rights in Florida? At what point do you go, okay, we advocate for parental rights until we disagree with the parent, which is exactly what's happening on gender-affirming hormone treatment for minors. Now, whether you agree on hormone therapy or not, the parents are involved with the medical professionals and the minor. Why don't parents get to make that decision along with their child? It's because the radical rights are disagreeing with it. One other thing that I think is important, first off, HRC proves why the HRC is so important to our community. The statistical analysis of saying, let's look at the results of what's happening in Florida is so critically important. The headline of this story is the results of how many in our community in Florida want to leave Florida. If we were able to do it, or not, but if we were able to do it, this survey reporting says 520,000 Floridians would leave the state of Florida if they could. That's the headline. 38 out of every 100 LGBT in Florida would leave if they could. 520,000. Can you imagine the economic impact, the turmoil that it would create for school bus drivers and servers in restaurants and people that are working in hotels and it would be economic chaos. Nobody would advocate that.
No.
Oh, wait. Last week, the chairman of the Republican Committee of Florida, the GOP Republican chairman of the state of Florida, said, if you don't like it and you oppose what we're doing in LGBT issues, including don't say gay, don't let the door hit you in the ass as you leave Florida. Who is advocating 520,000 Floridians to leave the state of Florida? The chairman of the GOP of Florida. It's
Disgusting.
unbelievable.
Can I also just make one other point that this is so anti-Republican that Republican principles, having small government not being in people's lives,
Right.
and that there are already laws on the books when it comes to the Hippocratic Oath of medical professionals. We have the American Medical Association, the American Psychiatric Association, that both recognize that this is a situation to be dealt with personally and individually, and the role of politicians to get involved in between your healthcare provider is completely anti-Republican.
Yeah.
Next, let's queer up education. Georgia law making challenging school books easier remains rarely used. When Allison Strickland urged a suburban Atlanta school board in June to remove 4 books from school libraries, she was following a path cleared by Georgia's Republican lawmakers. But after the bitterly debated Georgia law took effect January 1st, the Associated Press found few books challengers are using it. One key element restraining complaints is that the law only allows parents of current students to challenge the books. Although not new, book challenges have surged since 2020, part of a backlash to what kids read and discuss in public schools. Conservatives want to stop children from reading books with themes on sexuality, gender, race, and religion that they find objectionable. PEN America, a group promoting freedom of expression, counted 4,000 instances of book banning nationwide from July 2021 to December 2022. But while fights are ongoing in Forsyth County, where Strickland was protesting, at least 15 other large Georgia districts surveyed by the Associated Press said they have received no demands to remove books under the law. Forsyth County was once a rural locale where white mobs terrorized the black minority into fleeing in 1912. But suburban growth made it well-educated, affluent, and diverse. Only 47% of Forsyth students were white and non-Hispanic last year. But it's also heavily Republican. And crowds attacked the system's diversity, equity, and inclusion plan in 2021. I think this is a very interesting story because it goes along with the theme of creating a solution for a problem that really doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. It exposes the book banning as a stunt and as something that is really just based in repression. I think that a lot of times when we're discussing this issue that we don't take into account the premise that there was a whole selection process for what goes into a school library. They're not just taking a copy of the Library of Congress and bringing every book in there. They're selected for educational purposes to begin with. So I think it should not be any big surprise that we don't have a ton of these book bans, but it should be very revealing what the basic bigots, as John Hayden would refer them, are really up to.
Yeah, I think that and I don't know if the 4,000 accounts for overlap, like if a book is banned in Georgia and a book is banned in Kansas, if that counts as one or counts as two. But I know we've got like 1,100 books that have been banned here in Florida. So as we were talking about, you were mentioning in the pre-show discussion that Georgia has managed to do what Florida didn't do, and that because here I could go in. I don't have a child. I never have had a child. Probably never going to have a child in a school district, but I could go into a Broward school and say, I don't like this particular book. And then that sparks a review process, which most of the time, and at least in certain other parts of the state, has led to books getting banned, especially including like essentially a picture book about 2 penguins that raise an orphan child or an orphan penguin.
That's crazy.
I was just thinking back, I grew up in Homestead. It's back in the 80s, 90s, a southern community. We had a lot of kids with Georgia parents, Alabama parents. Mm-hmm. And we used to make fun of Georgia and Alabama all the time. And we were like, yeah, those podunk people out there.
They got the last laugh.
Yeah. They're not advanced like us Homestead people.
Oh, wow.
And now to read this, it's like, oh my God. Like, have we sunk so low?
Yeah.
It's like the theme of this, of tonight.
It is.
It really.
Hear the question clearly. Have we sunk so low? The answer is
yes.
Yeah.
But can we sink further?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is super interesting in the story is compare and contrast. The reporting is showing that in Georgia, there has not been an overwhelming response to ban books. John gives the soundbite to the story. In Georgia, right across our border, the state is not up in arms about books in schools. In Florida, on the south side of the border, 1,100 books are banned. Now, when you see such stark statistics in the story, root and follow the lead of the story back to its organization. We may not like the governor of Georgia. We may not like lots of the political structure in Georgia. But what's going on different in Georgia that is going on in Florida? Let me connect the dots. First, the governor of the state of Florida, who is running for president of the United States, has created and orchestrated a system to allow book banning with almost absolute universal acceptance. You don't have to have students. You can do it anonymously. It automatically gets pulled off the shelf and becomes in review, which could take God only knows how long. And the threat of retribution has chilled librarians and school boards all over the state of Florida, led by a radical supermajority in the House and a radical governor of Florida. And then they take it one step farther. They have something as a political structure in Florida that they don't necessarily have in the same way in Georgia. And what is that called? Moms for Liberty. Moms for Liberty are sitting in Florida counties, including Fort Lauderdale, Broward County, to be able to be in a system where they rattle the bars and say, they're stealing your children, they're stealing your children, they're stealing your children. And that is successful in Florida, where that's not going on to the same degree in Georgia. And it's not going on of Moms for Liberty in the same success, because who is the principal benefactor and pusher of Moms for Liberty in the state of Florida? Governor Ron DeSantis. Connect all of the dots. Don't believe me? Research. That's what's happening in Florida versus what we've just reported is happening in Georgia.
Yeah, and I'll just speak to the diversity piece too, because I spent almost 2 years right next door to Forsyth County in Stone Mountain, and my younger son was one of 2 white kids in their school. And at the time, he was he was not trans at the time, and I wish that he had better access to the books that they have in libraries now, because maybe it would have sped up the process and allowed more self-discovery. So grateful to see that Georgia's continuing to be diverse. It was actually pretty funny because he would be asked by other kids in the school if he was Bosnian. Not white, Bosnian, because the school was so diverse. They literally didn't have a lot of white kids in it. So I thought that was interesting. Next, we are proud of our special partnership with Sunshine Cathedral, the world's largest queer church here in Fort Lauderdale. Supporting that partnership, we are broadcasting from our permanent set here at Sunshine Cathedral at the Happening Out television studios. We broadcast Sunshine Cathedral's Sunday International Service at 10:30 a.m.
That is today's news for the LGBTQ plus community on the world's first and only daily LGBTQ plus evening news show.
If our LGBTQ plus community is important to you, share this news with your friends and family, whether they're LGBTQ plus or not. Are you, like most of America, part of our very large LGBTQ plus audience watching this live LGBTQ plus news broadcast right now on Roku, Apple TV, Android TV, Amazon Fire TV, and LGBT TV?
Queer News Tonight is the only live LGBTQ plus digital television show in the world that is out of the closet and into the headlines. We need your support. If our LGBTQ plus community is to grow, we must tell our LGBTQ plus stories and bring them to the attention of the broader world outside the LGBTQ plus community.
This is the only place in the world that tells these types of LGBTQ plus stories in motion and sound. That is the passion of Hotspots Magazine, Happening Out Television Network, and Queer News Tonight.
I'm your anchor, Al Ferguson, and on behalf of these LGBTQ plus reporters, the anchors of Queer News Tonight, including Lexi Goza, John Hayden, TriniDaddy, and Mark Pettitt, we will see you daily at 8 p.m. And to our LGBTQ plus world, we wish you good night.
Good night.
Happy.
We are Queer News Tonight, the world's first and only live daily LGBTQ plus evening news show, brought to you from Happening Out Television Network. We operate in the same model of PBS and NPR, but for the LGBTQ plus community. We educate, inform, and entertain by supporting the 10 pillars of our LGBTQ plus community, with more than 100,000 a week watching us on Roku, Apple Television, and other channels. To keep the story going, we accept donations with 100% transparency. Stay updated and live authentically with Queer News Tonight.